Welcome to my ultimate spell making guide, where you get to learn about making spells. So in order to make spells, you have to have access to the altar of spell making. And as far as I know, there are two in the game. There's one in Frostcrag Spire, which is a free house that you can just walk up to and break into. There also is a quest associated with getting into here. I don't really remember where it's at, but that doesn't matter. You can just open an average lock and it's yours. You have to buy candles from the Mystic Emporium dude's wife in the Imperial Market District, or you can join the Mages Guild and go to the Arcane University, and there's also a spellmaking altar there, which does not cost you money, but in order to get into the Arcane University, you have to do all of the recommendation quests at all of the major towns for the Mages Guild. So if you want to just get spellmaking quickly, the fastest way is to make money through alchemy or joining the Mages Guild and selling their inventory stuff back to them, like all their crafting stuff and their alchemy stuff back to them. But to actually make spells, you have to activate the spellmaking altar, and when you click on an effect, it will pop up. It'll give you customizable settings, and then also it will display a mana cost. So if I take this absorb health and put it at 100, it's going to cost me 116 Magicka in order to cast this. And then as I add different things to it, like duration and area, it also scales the cost. So you can combine effects, and this is one of the most important things in spell making, because if you want to deal high damage, you're going to look to do specific things with your opening spells. And usually what you want to do, if you want to deal high damage, is you want to create weakness to magic effects. And what this does is future spells will deal more damage or be scaled. I always refer to it as ramping, because it takes a low damage thing and keeps ramping it. And as you do it more and more, like if I cast a weakness spell and then cast another weakness spell and then recast the first one is now ramped. So the first one improves the second one improves the first one. So they keep stacking essentially. So a very common weakness spike is something like this. You have ramping on your elemental damage and ramping on your spells. So this would just be a basic weakness spell. And you can make this at range. You can give this an AoE. Now, the duration, it's really up to you. The longer the duration, the more time you have to land a spell that deals damage or to land a spell that ramps a future spell. But this is the basics of making damage spells. And then if you want to add a radius to it, I would say radius 15 is pretty optimal for AoE. 10 can be quite small, so if you're trying to hit multiple enemies that are kind of in a crowd and they're not all on top of each other, especially if they have large hitboxes and they displace each other physically, 10 might not hit them all, but 15 is kind of the sweet spot for hitting large groups. So if you're looking for AoE, I do recommend 15. It does increase the cost, but as long as you keep your duration low, you can get away with casting these for relatively cheap. To remove effects, you just shift plus left click to remove effects. You can also combine effects that aren't really related to each other. So for example, I can do shield on self for 30 for 5 seconds, and then I can also add paralyze on touch. So this casts shield on yourself and then paralyzes an enemy. So this is just an example of a utility spell. Now, if you want to make spells that are really good at crowd control and damage, paralyze 1 second is a fantastic spell. If you have 100 illusion, what you can do is, you can increase the radius to 10 to 15, so that if you have an AoE spell, you can actually deal huge damage and paralyze. Now, some enemies like skeletons, storm atronachs, and spiders are immune to paralyze, so just be aware of that. But a lot of the biggest threats in the game are not, so even just paralyzing them for 1 second can shut them down. And the cost of that, so I'm just gonna add this spell. The cost is quite low, so this paralyze for 1 second and 15 radius costs around 20, so that's what it costs to add it to a spell. So if I wanted to add some kind of damage nuke, I could put this at 25, 15, 2 second radius. 2 second duration. Okay, so that's an example of a utility damage where you can shut things down. There's also other effects like Fortify Magicka. This can be a really good effect because essentially what it gives you is 100 Magicka for 130 seconds. I'm sorry, for 120 seconds. It cost me 130, but as soon as you cast this, you gain 100 magic to use. So it really only costs you 30, and then it lasts long enough that if you regenerate or you use potions or Welkin stones to reset your Magicka, you now just have increased magic pool. So effects like this are really useful for ramping your willpower if you want to level up your willpower temporarily. It is also good for just increasing your magic pool. So a common spell I like to run is something like this. It's very expensive to use, but if you cast other spells that are cheaper that get you more Magicka, especially on Breton or High Elf with one of the magic improving birth signs, you can easily cast these expensive spells. And Fortifying Willpower gives you insane regeneration, and as long as you keep recasting these periodically, 120 seconds is quite a long duration. Like, you can fight several groups of enemies before it would expire anyways. So this allows you to spam summons, to spam high damage spells, to spam debuffs, to spam heals, to spam whatever you want. And the nice thing about it is it doesn't really cost you anything. It just costs you Magicka, which is a renewable resource. Okay, and then for other effects, you can always combine like tanking. So if you want to give yourself some magic resist before a fight, like let's say your build doesn't have enchanted magic resist effects yet, you could throw like magic resist with like a shield effect if you're like unarmored, like if you're a mage build or something like this. So you could throw this on yourself before a fight so that you can tank a little bit. You can also combine things like this with healing. So if you want to throw everything onto one spell, you could like heal yourself for a bit. So that way you get tanking plus like 75 health from this. Now let's talk about magnitude and duration, because this is very important for damage. So if I cast a spell for 100 damage, it's going to cost me, in this case, 56 Magicka at 100 destruction. If I reduce that to 50 damage over 2 duration, it now only costs me 46. So it's the same damage, but we just moved it over time. So the most efficient way to deal damage with spells is actually over time. And usually what you want to do is deal like 25 damage over 4 seconds or like 33 damage over 3 seconds, because it'll save you Magicka. So if we do 33 over 3, which is basically 99 damage, the cost is reduced even further. So we just shaved off 5 Magicka. And then if we go 25 over 4, it's reduced even further. So the more you extend the duration and decrease the damage, so 20 times 5 is now 36. So the difference between 100 damage over time and 100 damage right away is almost 50%. We went from like 56 to 36. And obviously you can reduce it even further. We could do like, I don't know, something times 6. Let's see, 17, 16, whatever 15 times 6 is. I think that's just 90 though, isn't it? Yeah, just 90 damage. So you can do this, and you'll get a pretty good result. Now if we were to do 16, so it's 32, so it's still shaving off. I think this is around 100 damage. So this is pretty close, and we've shaved off, 20 something Magicka. Now the thing is though, I did test this. If you split the damage over time, it doesn't reduce it. So like if I do 50 damage over 5 seconds versus 50 damage right away, the only factor is that they take more damage up front. Like the damage ends up being the same. So you can really put your damage, you can really run low damage over time and still have it be good. So one of the things that you can do that's also really interesting is you can combine ramps with physical weapons that are enchanted. So for example, if I have an enchanted sword or dagger and I use weakness to fire, shock, frost, and magic, and then recast a second one to ramp the damage, then start attacking an enemy, I can actually deal huge damage even off of 7 points per strike. And I showed this in the one recent video I did where I was like AoE killing a bunch of endgame enemies on master mode in the Kavach fight. I waited to go there until way late. But you don't need a ton of damage to kill as long as enemies have 3 stacks of weakness. So like if you cast, I'll show some example spells. So if you cast something like this, so this AoE debuff, this is my first spell. This is the first thing I would cast on a group of enemies at close range. A weakness for 15 seconds, or I'm sorry, for 15 feet for 5 seconds. And I have that for all of the elements plus poison. And then I cast my second spell, which does the same thing, but I also added Paralyze on touch, as we talked about earlier. This is really nice because if you're trying to cast at a group of enemies, this prevents like most of them from getting away, and it only adds like 10 to 20 magicka, which really isn't that much considering that if those enemies were to be hitting you, if they were to like break off and run around, you'd now have to cast magic on those like the survivors, right? This keeps them under control, and it's a really nice effect. But we do a second weakness for 6 seconds in 15-foot radius, and then I actually cast a third weakness for this AoE nuke. So weakness to magic, weakness to everything, and then I actually add in a little bit of damage. So this is only 7 points of damage over 3 seconds, or like per second, like over 3 seconds. So it's really 21 per trigger, like per spell. So you don't have to deal a ton of damage for it to be effective. Like if you cast 2 weakness to magic debuffs and then even just a low damage spell that does like 10 damage per second over, you know, 3 to 5 seconds, you can deal huge damage and spike things down. Like this actually does a lot just with 2 ramps, and then this acts as the third weakness ramp, which then allows me to start going to town with my actual melee weapon, this chaotic dagger that just has a 7 damage enchantment. So you might be thinking like, oh, 7 damage isn't that much, but this really isn't 7 damage because you have to add all of these damage values up, so it's really 26 damage per hit. And then there's another weapon, like here's another example of a more damaging, like single strike oriented weapon. So we're looking at 5 points per second over 3 seconds, but there's 4 of these effects. So essentially we're looking at 60 damage over 3 seconds. And then with the weakness ramps from the other spells, the damage is huge. And then we also have Absorb Magicka just to like fill out the sword. But this is the power of spell making. You can make pretty crazy effects that are pretty broken. There's other things as well. For example, if you want to like make a summon, you can make the duration longer, but it will cost you more magic. And you can also do things like, let's say I want to make like 30-second Dremora Lord, but I also want to like buff myself. So you can like combine effects. So we can do like, say like a 30-second buff on self. The nice thing about custom spellmaking is you can customize the effects. So we can do like a tanking. So this way we can condense our hotkeys, so we don't have to have like a shield spell and a summon spell, and we can just have them all in one. And you can do this with any effect. But that's pretty much it for this one. This is just kind of like an introduction into this. I know I called it the ultimate thing. There's definitely more to it than this. I'll do a continuation of this in the future. That'll be like more niche, weird, fringe things you can do with spell making. But definitely drop a comment as to what types of custom spells you like to use and how you like to use them in your builds, especially for master mode. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.